For the personal perspective, we researched on how the COVID pandemic affected us personally in our daily lives in terms of food waste. Let's first consider how the prices for the goods we buy on our own have changed. For example, we have the prices of meats and other vegetables. According to the FAO Food Price Index, the prices of food have been at an all-time high for the past 6 years during the pandemic. So what exactly does this mean? This means that the food we buy costs more, and we don't buy exactly as much as before. Therefore, we couldn't afford to waste as much either. Secondly, and for obvious reasons, people stopped going to restaurants and food chains altogether. So you as a person stopped going to McDonald's for an evening snack. So what do you do now? You will learn to cook on your own and how to manage the waste created. Because of the pandemic, people had to resort to home cooking, and thus less waste was created, as they wouldn't want to buy more ingredients at their inflated prices. The third effect of the pandemic was the mere social effect it had on food waste. Everyone was encouraged to save money, save electricity, save water, and thus save food. Since during the pandemic, we didn't truly know when the situation could end, people began stocking up on resources to be prepared for any type of situation. These resources were used to the last drop and only used when necessary, decreasing the food waste at home. Overall, the pandemic affected our individual food habits quite a lot.
To get a true glimpse into the local perspective in our city, we interviewed 3 people who serve in the food industry in Hyderabad. Subhash Reddy, an owner of the local restaurant Chef King here in Hyderabad. Rakesh Upadhyay, general manager of the Marriott Hotel in Bhopal and Bihar, who worked in the Hyderabad branch during the pandemic. And Sous chef Sarvanan of Marigold Hotel, another restaurant in Hyderabad. We asked all of them a list of questions that pertain to food supply and food waste during the pandemic. And some of their answers may surprise you. The first thing we asked them all about were the ingredients, as that's the whole crux of the matter. How has the supply of ingredients, or food, been affected by the pandemic? When asking about price and quality. So, how has the quality of the ingredients changed since the price has nearly doubled or tripled?
मेरा नाम गुलाम नबी है। मैं यहाँ जो है तकरीबन बहुत दिनों से काम करता हूँ। ये महंगाई की वजह से जो है बहुत लॉस में चल रहा है। हम लोग क्वालिटी वही बना रहे हैं, सिर्फ पहले से ज़्यादा जो है अभी कुछ चीज़ों का रेट ज़्यादा ले रहे हैं। तो हम लोग सोच रहे हैं कि इससे भी और ज़्यादा आगे ले जाएं, तो इस वजह से जो है कस्टमर को कोई परेशानी नहीं होना। माल वही है, बस थोड़ा जो है उसमें बदलाव आया है, सेम वही है।
So what happens typically in a restaurant and in a hotel is that we go for an annual contract of ingredients, be it perishable, be it groceries or dairy product or meats. Everything goes for a annual contract. So to say that prices were increased, it must have increased, and it did increase, but it did not impact our hotel business, because even if the prices are low, the suppliers will end up taking the same amount from us. So no prices were increased, but yes, availability of the product was very, very restricted. All the product which were coming from other cities and other towns were restricted for some time. The availability of product was a big question mark. A case in point can be seafood. A case in point can be vegetables, like we get seafood from Visakhapatnam and Kerala. So it was not happening. Then the English vegetable usually comes from Pune and from Uti, all those things. So that was not happening. So there were issues with few of them. Like typically lamb or the mutton comes from Rajasthan and some from other cities in Andhra Pradesh also, but the availability was a small challenge. But prices, to say, not perceived for the hotel, which were contracted for a year.
Oh, wow, that is definitely something I didn't consider when I first researched this. Have the ingredients that you just mentioned, has their quality been affected?
Oh, certainly, yes. What happens, nothing can change a fresh ingredient. Anything that is coming from storage is the qualitatively there is a loss. So most of the product which were coming during pandemic were either coming from long distance or were stored for some time, and the fresh vegetables and the fresh greens were not available at all. So everything was in a big question. For instance, a case in point can be chicken. Because all the slaughterhouses were closed, so only frozen chicken was coming. Only the frozen lamb was coming. Frozen seafood was coming. So that was number one. Then came our, greens and the vegetables and the fruits. Very limited fruits were coming during pandemic. You all must be aware. So all the big, because of the transportation, nothing much was happening. So there were challenges in terms of quality, as well as the number of varieties that are available.
Hey, good evening, guys. This is Chef Sarvanan, working for Marigold Hotels. I have 22 years of experience so far in diversified industry like Carnival Cruise Lines, Delta Airlines, Oberoi Flight Services, luxury hotels, and everything. All put together 22 plus years.
So the pandemic has changed a lot of things in India and all over the world. Have the prices for your ingredients changed?
Yes, of course. After pandemic, some of the ingredients has got hiked up and some has come down. For example, meat prices, most of them didn't eat. So that the reason chicken prices and meat prices have come down. And other pulses and other rates has been increased a little bit.
Has the quality of the ingredients been affected?
No, not at all. Not at all. The quality of the ingredients, it's top of the quality what we buy, and we insist in quality, or else you will not get the end product right.
Now you can notice a rather obvious contrast between the answers provided by the staff at Chef King and Mr. Upadhyay. While Chef King and Marigold Hotel both say their prices have fluctuated, Mr. Upadhyay says that it's not the prices, just the scarcity and quality. We can probably chalk that up to the fact that Marriott Hotel buys its ingredients through an annual contract from growers, livestock farms, and other places where they get the ingredients, which means that their prices don't change nearly as much. Unfortunately, we cannot confirm Marigold Hotel's methods of obtaining ingredients. According to Subhash Reddy, most of the ingredients come from buying large quantities from retailers. As we covered in our personal perspective, retail prices for lots of food have increased. And as we will discuss further when we talk about global impacts, this is due more to logistics than the actual production. That is why a private annual contract like Marriott's does not change in price nearly as much as retail pricing. Direct to consumer transport is much cheaper than a producer to retail to the consumer. Next, we asked about restaurant traffic and delivery services. Obviously, traffic in your restaurant has decreased due to the pandemic. How has this affected third-party delivery softwares like Zomato and Swiggy for home deliveries?
Okay. Myself Bhuvaneshwari, मैं सुपरवाइजर से वर्क कर रही हूँ यहाँ. अब बिफोर कोरोना कस्टमर्स पूरा रेस्टोरेंट्स का आना और टेबल का होते. आफ्टर कोरोना बाहर आने को कौन भी वो नहीं कर रहा, रेडी नहीं है. सब लोग घर में होम डिलीवरी हम जोमेटो और स्विगी से कमिट है, लिंक हुआ.
Yes, so there's a big drive that's called Marriott on Wheels. Marriott on Wheels is a program whereby we do food delivery, which was even before pandemic that was very popular. And the pandemic, it got a lot of impetus, and we were able to penetrate our business into the different societies, and it was pretty helpful. It was, yes.
Oh,
But
well,
we do not, the choice of third party aggregators such as Zomato, etc., that is left to individual hotels to decide. And many were using Zomato, etc., for delivery.
yes. Oh, I actually didn't know about that. Well, after the pandemic, has Marriott on Wheels gotten more orders than they usually have because now people are staying at home and they haven't been able to go to restaurants as much?
Yes, so though that is growing, Marriott on Wheels is growing, and they continue to grow because of the innovation, the quality of menu, the quality of packaging, and with the Diwali coming our way, Diwali sweets, etc. So it has become big now. It has become big. It has become a new revenue source for all the hotels at this point in time.
Yes, of course. Previously, we used to get very few orders from Swiggy and Zomato when compared to the pandemic situation. Now our restaurant flow is very less when compared to situation pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. After pandemic, our Swiggy and Zomato sales has been increased, doubled, more than double. If I could say it's 130% has been increased in it. Yeah.
Not much to interpret from there. The interviews speak for themselves. Home delivery has reached a peak for all of them during the pandemic. We also asked some questions about food waste.
How has COVID affected food waste in your restaurant? Before COVID and after COVID, how has the amount of food being wasted changed?
मैं ये बताना चाह रहा हूँ कि कोविड से पहले जो है हमारा रेस्टोरेंट बहुत ही अच्छा, बहुत ही शानदार चल रहा था। अब कोविड के बाद क्या हुआ कि कस्टमर जो है बहुत कम आ रहे हैं कोरोना की वजह से। पहले हम लोग को जो है समझ में आ रहा था कितना माल मंगाना चाहिए, कितना नहीं मंगाना चाहिए, और अभी जो है कोरोना की वजह से हम लोग को समझ में नहीं आ रहा है और बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो है हमारी ख़राब हो जा रही हैं, जैसा चिकन, फ्रूट्स और वेज सब्ज़ी वगैरह जो है बहुत सारी चीज़ें हम लोग को फेंकना पड़ता है। ये कोविड की वजह से हम लोग को मालूम नहीं हो रहा कि किस दिन जो है कस्टमर ज़्यादा होगा और किस दिन जो है कस्टमर कम होगा। इसकी वजह से हम लोग को कभी कम ज़्यादा होना पड़ता है, कभी फेंकना पड़ता है और कभी जो है हम लोग को बचा करके रखना पड़ता है।
ठीक है। Are you taking measures to make sure you waste as little food as possible?
Yeah, of course. पहले लॉकडाउन से पहले हम लोग क्या है ना, हम लोगों को पता चलता था कि आज 50 बंदे आते हैं या 100 बंदे आते हैं, कुछ पार्टीज था, कुछ पता चलता था, इसलिए हम लोग क्या है ना उसी हिसाब से डालते थे। आजकल क्या है ना हम लोगों को पता नहीं चलता कि कौन कितना आ रहा, कौन, इसलिए वेस्टेज हो रहा। दिस डेज व्हाट वी आर डूइंग इज हम लोग क्या है ना कम डाल रहे हैं। अगर कस्टमर्स ज़्यादा है तो भी उन लोगों को वेट करने के लिए बोल रहे हैं और जब का जब डाल के हम लोग दे रहे हैं। इसकी वजह से फ्रेश फूड दे रहे हैं हम लोगों को। जैसा है कि पहले हम लोग 11 बजे डाले तो वो 3 बजे तक चलता था। अभी क्या है ना वैसा नहीं कर रहे हैं हम लोग, 1 घंटा ऐसा हिसाब से लेके जा रहे हैं हम लोग, घंटे के हिसाब से लेके जा रहे हैं। उसकी वजह से हम लोग क्या है ना जो वेस्टेज है ना कम कर सकते। और जो किचन में पहले कोई भी कुछ भी नहीं करते थे, अपना काम करके चले जाते थे। ये जो कोरोना के बाद क्या है ना उन लोगों को बहुत सफ़र हो गया, या एज ए ओनर एज ए एम्प्लॉय हर बंदे सफ़र हो गया। अभी सब लोग काम पे ध्यान देके वेस्टेज कम करने के लिए सोच रहे। जितना फायदा ओनर को दे देंगे उन लोगों को उतना पैसा मिल जाएगा। पहले वो ऐसा नहीं था। अभी का सबको कुछ प्रॉब्लम हुआ था कोरोना की वजह से, इसलिए सब लोग ध्यान देके वेस्टेज कम करने के लिए सोच रहे।
Thank you.
Mr. Upadhyay and Mr. Sarvanan had very similar answers. Making food to order rather than creating batches makes more sense with the reduced traffic in the restaurants, and thus reduces a lot of waste occurring when the aforementioned batches weren't consumed. And now, for our last and one of the most important perspectives, the global perspective, by Sathak Mulukutla.
The global perspective of food supply and waste really focuses on two aspects: logistics and labor. This is because, unlike most other outbreaks, COVID-19 cannot be spread through food or livestock, according to the European Food Safety Authority. However, their packaging, transportation vehicles, and the people who package and transport them certainly can spread it. Throughout this section of our video, I'll be detailing out exactly how the supply chains globally have been affected by COVID-19. This portion of my research is mainly sourced from a paper written by Serpil and Mehmet Ade of the Kanakkale Onsikiz Mark University in Turkey on how COVID-19 has disrupted world food chains. A bibliography of all of our sources can be found at the end of our video. Let's start by laying out an example. We have farmer Pablo of Colombia. He grows coffee. His industry and his farm are very much labor intensive, as coffee is a luxury product. Then you have farmer Joe of the United States. His main trade is in wheat and other staple crops, which are much more capital intensive. These variations in factors of production drastically affect how each farmer was hit by the ramifications of the pandemic. An issue that Pablo faces is that his trade often contains a lot of seasonal employment, temporary employment, which depends on a certain time of year. Due to borders being locked down, people scared to migrate due to the coronavirus and sickness in general, he'll have a large shortage of labor to assist in harvesting and processing his coffee. Joe, on the other hand, doesn't need all that much labor to harvest his crops, as he's in a more developed country and has access to machines that greatly reduce his labor requirement. However, Joe also produces a lot of crop, which means that he needs to sell more of his crop to gain a significant profit than Pablo. And with border lockdowns, sterilization requirements, and food plant production reduction, it becomes increasingly difficult for him to sell and gain profit from his crop. What happens to the crop that Farmer Joe can't sell? Simple, it gets thrown away. In fact, that concept applies to most food grown in the primary sector. According to BBC, 14 million liters of milk are thrown away in America every day due to the pandemic because dairy farmers cannot find anyone to sell their milk to. In England, apparently 5 million liters of milk are at risk every day. Even tea growers in India have noticed a significant wastage increase since the pandemic has started. COVID-19 has truly upped the ante with global food waste. Another issue that cropped up was food processing plants. Due to workers getting sick, or rather their fear of getting sick, they stopped working there. That's no surprise considering the fact that most plants force workers in close quarters, force them to shout orders everywhere, and most of them have low health insurance. All factors that make them susceptible to COVID-19. This significantly reduced production in these plants, which caused a chain reaction on both ends of the supply chain. First, growers couldn't sell enough food to the plants as they did not have the capacity to produce anything. Then, the increase in demand for ingredients in retail stores due to the advent of increased home cooking meant that stores went out of stock quickly and could not replace their stock as fast, making prices for certain items such as meat and fish skyrocket. It's reported that the average consumer ratio for food consumption in developed countries was 50 to 50, comparing grocery stores and restaurants. But thanks to lockdowns across the globe, that statistic has almost reached 100% in favor of grocery stores. To summarize, we as a team have researched, interviewed, and explored many perspectives as to how the coronavirus and its subsequent lockdowns and pandemic have affected food supply and food waste personally, locally, and globally. We've discussed everything from why you waste less food while cooking indoors, to how restaurant ingredients were affected in price and quality, to how staple and luxury food items were impacted by the pandemic.
We thank all of the interviewees we talked to for their cooperation in creating this project, and we thank all of you for taking the time to watch and listen to our research. Thank you.
As promised, a bibliography of our research.